Sometimes I wonder if maybe the most spiritual people are the most eccentric people. Carolyn Houselander was a religious writer in England in the early 1900s, and someone had called her a divine eccentric. And in her autobiography, she describes a number of religious experiences that she had, including this one. She writes, "I was in an underground train, a crowded train in which all sorts of people jostled together, sitting and strap hanging, workers of every sort going home at the end of a day. Quite suddenly I saw with my mind, but as vividly as a wonderful picture, Christ in them all. But I saw more than that. Not only was Christ in every one of them, but because he was in them, the whole world was there too, in that underground train. Not only the world as it was at that moment, not only all the people in all the countries of the world, but all those people who had lived in the past and all those yet to come. I came out and walked in the street and walked for a long time in the crowds. It was the same here on every side, in every passerby, everywhere. Christ. After a few days, the vision faded. People looked the same again. There was no longer the same shock of insight for me. Christ was hidden again." Well, that was a mystical experience that she had. And I think many people have mystical experiences, maybe not quite as strong as that one, but some kind of experience of God in everyday life. And I think the experience that she described there was an example of today's gospel lesson. Our gospel lesson this morning consists of the very first words of the very first chapter of the Gospel of John, sometimes called the prologue to John. We always read this reading the first Sunday after Christmas. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being with him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being through him was life, and the life was the light of all people." Well, this is poetry. It's poetry because John is trying to express something that you can't express in ordinary language. So you need to use a special kind of language called poetry. This prologue may have been a hymn of the early church that was known to John. But at any rate, this is the language of poetry. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." He was in the beginning with God. Well, the word he's talking about here is the Word of God. It's Christ. Christ, the Word of God. He's saying that Christ has been present from the very beginning of creation. In the beginning was the Word. Now, some people call this the Christ mystery or the Christ event. What it means is that God didn't just create the world and set it spinning off into space by itself. God's not like a clockmaker that made this mechanical device and wound it up and just left it to run. No. God has been part of the creation ever since the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. So God has been in the world, in the universe, from the start. And we call that Christ. Now, somehow religion has given us the idea that the world is evil, and we've got to somehow escape from the world. And Christ came to earth to rescue us from this evil planet and take us to heaven. That's not what John is saying here in this passage. He's saying that God has been present in the creation ever since the beginning. Trouble is, we didn't recognize him. And so God had to send Jesus of Nazareth, the human being, so that we'll finally get it, to reveal God's love and God's compassion. That's what it took. So God is in everything. Christ is everywhere. Jesus didn't just come to save a few special people and condemn the rest to hell. Christ died for all. I think some people want to put God in a box so they can decide who's going to go to heaven and who's going to hell. But you can't put God in a box. God or Christ is available to everyone. When I was a kid, I thought God was an old man with a white beard on a throne in heaven. But as I've gotten older and as I've grown in my faith, I think, I realize that God is so much more than that. God isn't just out there somewhere in heaven. God is also here on earth, present with us. And I think that as you come to know God, you come to know God's love and compassion and forgiveness. That's part of the growth of the life of faith. You begin to see with God's eyes, with the compassion of God and the love of God. I think that's what Carol Houselander experienced on that underground train and walking the streets there in England. She saw Christ in every person on that train and every person on the street. You find this often in poetry. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the wonderful English poet, wrote this: "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes." Taking off our shoes means to humble ourselves before God and to learn to accept God. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. And what has come into being through him was life. And the life is the light of all people. In other words, Christ is the light of all people. Christ is in every person, Christian or non-Christian, believer, non-believer. Christ is all and is in all, as the Apostle Paul put it in the letter to the Colossians. The great psychologist Carl Jung believed that every person has what he called a God archetype in him. It's sort of like an instinct to lead us into inclusivity and acceptance and compassion. So he's saying that he observed that people had God in them, working in them to make them whole. As the prologue to John says, what has come into being through Christ was life. And the life was the light of all people. We act this out in the Eucharist when we come to receive the bread and the wine. At the Last Supper, Jesus said, he took the bread and broke it, and he said, "This is my body. Take and eat." So when we eat the bread, we're becoming one with Christ. And because the bread is a symbol of all creation, we're becoming one with all creation. It's a mystical thing that we're doing. And when Christ took the cup of wine, he said, "This is my blood which is shed for you. Take it and drink." So when we drink the wine of the Eucharist, we become one with Christ, and we're becoming one with everything that has blood or sap within it, all the living parts of creation. So Christ helps us become part of everything. It's that mystical understanding of God. I'm not sure, I might be preaching heresy here, This is a lot of my own thoughts and a lot of thoughts of Richard Rohr's, especially in his book, The Universal Christ, where he's trying to expand the understanding of Christianity to make it more acceptable to people today, more inclusive, more compassionate, more understanding. So John is the most mystical of all the Gospels, and he invites us to enter into the Christ mystery. The mystery of God, he's saying, is working in us, and it's working in the world. So I'll close with a poem. That is the words from the first verse of hymn 82. This poem is often associated with the Gospel of John. Of the Father's love begotten, ere the worlds began to be. He is Alpha and Omega, he the source, the ending, he. Of the things that are, that have been, and that future years shall see, evermore and evermore.